On the left, this is Forsyth Park, over 30 acres, one of the most beautiful parks in the country. If you get a chance to walk through it, it's really worth a look. The Forsyth Park fountain in the center of the park. President of the college, Miss Paula Wallace, a major force here in the city, the Savannah College of Art and Design. On the left, this is Forsyth Park, over 30 acres, one of the most beautiful parks in the country. If you get a chance to walk through it, it's really worth a look. The Forsyth Park fountain in the center of the park. And the big white building coming up on the right here. This is the old Candler General Hospital, the Wesley Monumental Methodist Church. Notice all the main sanctuaries to all these downtown churches is going to be on the second floor. Coming up next is Calhoun Square, named for Senator John C. Calhoun of South Carolina. Calhoun was the Vice President of the United States under two different presidents, John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. Calhoun Square. Coming up next is stop number 5, the old Massey Common School, the oldest public school in the state of Georgia. Classes were held here from the 1850s until the 1970s. And today it serves as an educational museum. And it's run by the Chatham Savannah Board of Education. And I think we got another guest coming on board here, folks. Hello there, welcome, sir.
Good
day.
Good day, everybody. Good day. One more time. Good day, everybody.
Good day.
All right. Now, my name is Robert Smalls, and I was born in Beaufort, South Carolina, in the year of 1839, into what many around here at the time referred to as the Peculiar Institution. Well, let's just call it what it was. Human slavery. And growing up around the free colored people, I knew I had to make myself and my family like them. So I took a chance, and I succeeded. At 3 a.m. on May 13, 1862, in the midst of a civil war, myself and 8 fellow crewmen on the CSS Planter put into action a plan of escape. When the white officers left the ship to spend the evening in town, well, we absconded with the ship and set off for the federal blockade surrounding Charleston, sailing straight for the USS Only. And upon their boarding, I promptly surrendered the ship, all of its cargo, and most importantly, a Confederate ship's code, complete with a map of all the mines and torpedoes that have been laid in Charleston Harbor. So, in Confederate terms, a big old whoopsie. And needless to say, this left quite the impression on the commanders of the United States Armed Forces. But most important, gave me the most valuable thing in the world, my freedom. Now, my time is running mighty short. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm sweating like a hot pig in July. So, hope you all have long days and pleasant nights, and please enjoy the whole of Savannah. And one more thing. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Robert Smalls. You never know who you're going to meet on these tours, folks. This is the old Massey Common School, the oldest public school in the state of Georgia. It's now a museum. If you get a chance to go inside, in the second floor, there's an 1850s classroom, complete with slate blackboard and dunce cap. You won't find those in schools these days. This is Calhoun Square on the left, and as you can see, there's no monument in Calhoun Square. But if you look around the square, all of the homes surrounding Calhoun Square, all of these homes date from the 1850s. And with the exception of the automobiles and the pavement, this is probably what this square looked like in the 1850s. If you'll notice, all of the main entrances to these homes is on the second floor. That's because they were all built before the age of the automobile, and it was still horse and buggy days back then. All these streets were still dirt. And those horses would kick up a lot of dust and dirt as they went by. So the people moved the main entrance to the second floor to avoid all that dust and dirt. Normally the kitchens would be located on the first floor of these homes. But if you'll notice in the historic district, most of your homes, the main entrance is always going to be on the second floor for that very reason. Look in the Waynes again here, folks, and you'll see some more of these old carriage houses built on the back of these fine mansions for the people to store their carriages in the evening. Horse and buggy days back then. All these streets was still dirt. Crossing over Jones Street once again. Very expensive homes on Jones Street. Notice all the main entrances to these homes is on the second floor. Built before the age of the automobile. And coming up is Lafayette Square, named for the Marquis de Lafayette, the French general who assisted George Washington during the Revolutionary War. Lafayette came to Savannah in 1825 and dedicated several of the monuments here in the city. As we turn to the right on Lafayette Square, look to your left, the big home facing the square. That is the Andrew Woe Mansion. Andrew Woe is a wealthy cotton planter here. And his son, Willie Woe, got married to Juliet Gordon of the railroad family, and she became Juliet Gordon Woe. She founded the Girl Scouts in the rear of that home in 1912 and passed away in the upstairs bedroom in 1927. That is a house museum today, the Andrew Woe Mansion. On the right, the Hamilton Turner Inn. It's a bed and breakfast today, built in the early 1900s. The first home in Savannah to have indoor lighting. People used to come stand in the square in the evening just to watch them turn the lights on. And coming up next is the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. This will be stop number 6, a Roman Catholic cathedral. Another one of Oglethorpe's prohibitions that didn't pan out. This is the largest church in the city. It takes up an entire city block. Seats well over 1,000 people. Restored in the 1890s after a fire, it's undergone several multi-million-dollar restorations since. One of the most beautiful interiors you'll ever see. It compares with churches you'll find over in Europe. The Stations of the Cross and the stained glass windows imported from Austria. Folks, it's free and open to the public every day until 5 p.m. unless there's a service going on. And I think there's a daily mass going on right now, but it's open every day till 5 p.m. if you want to come back by and take a look. I promise you will not be disappointed. One of the most beautiful interiors you'll ever see. We call it the Sistine. Sisters of Mercy came to Savannah in the 1830s from Charleston, South Carolina. They founded an orphanage and the school for girls here. The orphanage no longer exists, but the school for girls is still in operation today. It's called St. Vincent's Academy. It's a Catholic school for girls grades 9 through 12. And if you look up to your right here, you'll see a statue of one of those Sisters of Mercy with one of her students. St. Vincent's Academy, the oldest Catholic school in the state of Georgia. 1830s. Folks, we got to cross over Liberty Street next. Liberty. All of these homes, the main entrance on the second floor. We're coming up on the old dueling ground for the colony. Dueling was allowed in the colony until the early 1800s when it was banned. But up until that time, this is where two men had come to settle their differences, right here in this patch of green. They'd stand back to back with pistols, walk 10 paces, turn around and shoot. Lots of lives lost in this old dueling ground. But the loser didn't have too far to go. It was located right next door to the cemetery. This is Colonial Park Cemetery. And this cemetery was in use from 1750 to 1853.
Wow.
And it's said that around 3,000 people are buried out here. It's free and open to the public every day. It closes every day at sundown. The crypts you see in the cemetery, the brick structures, these can house up to 9 family members. Now, when General Sherman got here in the winter of 1864 on his march to the sea, some of his troops actually camped out here in the cemetery. And some of them got kind of bored waiting around for 6 weeks for supplies to come down from Boston. Some of them got their knives out and started carving different dates in some of these of the American Revolution. And we're back on Oglethorpe Avenue once again, named for our Colonial founder. Folks, look in the middle of the cemetery about 2 o'clock and you'll see a 4-poster monument. That is said to be the burial spot of Button Gwinnett. Button Gwinnett was one of 3 signers to the Declaration of Independence from Georgia. And by the way, Button Gwinnett lost his life in a duel. The fellow that shot him is also buried out here, General Lackland McIntosh. Now, when those Yankee soldiers left, they had kicked over some of the tombstones in the cemetery. And so when the people went to clean up after they left, they really didn't know what to do with them. So they placed them on the back wall of the cemetery here. They said they did not want these people to be forgotten. Beyond that is our Savannah Police Barracks, one of the oldest in the country. And don't worry, folks, we're saving up our money for some new police cars. Just joking, just joking. That's a 1953 Chevrolet.
Thank you.
We're turning here on Habersham Street, named for James Habersham, one of the early colonial settlers, and one of the most prominent of all the settlers. We're going to pass Habersham's home later on in the tour. It's now the Pink House Restaurant, the old Habersham home. Coming up here at the end of the block on the left-hand side, this is the historic Savannah Foundation headquarters, founded by 7 Savannah Wadies in 1955. They started the preservation movement here in the city. And this is the headquarters of the historic Savannah Foundation, charged with maintaining the integrity of our historic district. This next square is called Columbia Square. And coming up on the right in the middle of the block, one of my favorite museums. This is the Wet Military Museum. Looks kind of small, but it goes way back there in the back. If you're into military history, this is a must. This fellow's been collecting military artifacts ever since he was 10 years old. He has everything in here from the Civil War to the Gulf War. And if you're into military history, this is a must. He'll even sell you some of that stuff if you want to buy it. Open every day till 5 p.m., the Wet Military Museum. Very popular museum here in the city. Folks, we're on York Street now, named for the Duke of York. And this is one of the few street names that was not changed after the end of the Revolutionary War. A lot of these street names were changed, as you'll see on the tour, but not York Street. Named for the Duke of York. This next square coming up is called Green Square, Green with an E on the end of it, named for General Nathaniel Greene of Rhode Island. Greene was one of George Washington's favorite generals during the Revolutionary War. And when the war was over, Greene and his bride, Catherine, were given the Mulberry Grove plantation as a reward for his service. But being from Rhode Island, Greene was not used to the hot weather here in the summertime. Went out on his horse one hot summer afternoon, had a massive heat stroke and died. Greene left behind a widow, Katie Greene, and 5 children. Katie Greene wanted to stay on the plantation, so she hired a tutor to come down from New England to help educate her kids and help run the plantation. He was a graduate of Yale University, and the fellow's name was Eli Whitney. And the first summer he was here, he invented the cotton gin. Straight ahead, the smallest residence in the historic district. They claim it's 600 square feet, the smallest residence. This is Green Square, named for General Nathaniel Greene of Rhode Island. Another historic church coming up here. This is the Second African Baptist Church, not to be confused with the First African Baptist Church. But it was here in 1963 the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came and delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech to the congregation before he moved on to Washington, D.C. It's also the spot where the Union generals issued the famous Field Order Number 15, which granted all freed slaves 40 acres and a mule. Sadly, that never came to pass, though, because when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, the incoming president, Andrew Johnson, negated every single field order that was issued by the Union generals. So sadly, the people never got the 40 acres and a mule. We're going to turn here on President Street. Before the Revolution, this was King Street. One of the many street names that was changed after the Revolutionary War. President Street. And we're headed east on President Street. If you go straight on President Street for another 17 miles, you'll end up in the Atlantic Ocean. Tybee Island, Savannah Beach. But we're going to turn left here on East Broad Street. East Broad is the eastern boundary of the National Landmark Historic District, one of the largest in the country. And we'll be headed to our stop number 7, which is the Pirates House Restaurant. Really good food at the Pirates House if you're interested. They gave a speech to the citizens of Savannah right here in this square. When he left, it was named Washington Square in his honor. President George Washington, 1789. Now, Savannah's had 2 great fires in its history, one in 1779 and another in 1820. They were both very devastating fires. And this was before the days of the fire hose. The only way to put these fires out was with a bucket brigade. Folks, if you look on the side of some of these historic homes, you're going to see a bronze oval plaque. That plaque tells you 2 things. Number 1, it tells you the year the home was built. And number 2, it tells you for whom it was built. These plaques are placed there by the Historic Savannah Foundation. And there's about 200 of them all throughout the district. This one on the right built in 1798. So this is one of the few survivors of the Great Fire of 1820. One of the few survivors. Coming up next on the left, this is Warren Square, named for General Joseph Warren of Massachusetts. Warren was killed in the Battle of Bunker Hill, Boston, Massachusetts, 1770. Has complete control over what you do with the exterior of your home. They can even tell you the color to paint it. You'd ride right past this home on your right and never know it was built in 1995. We're coming up on Broughton Street next. Broughton Street is the main shopping area for downtown. And if you're going to do any shopping while you're here in town, you'll probably end up on Broughton Street. Most of the shops are about 3 or 4 blocks down to the right here. But this is the main shopping area for downtown. Broughton Street. Coming up on the right here at the end of the block, this is the Isaiah Davenport House. And this is where all the historic preservation started back in 1955. This home was built in 1819 by a master builder by the name of Isaiah Davenport. He built the home for his family. They were going to tear it down in 1955 and make a parking lot out of it. 7 Savannah ladies got together, formed the Historic Savannah Foundation. They came up with $20,000 and saved this home one day before the wrecking ball. It's now a house museum, but this is where it all started, the preservation movement. We call those 7 ladies the Magnificent 7. Look on the 3rd step of the Davenport house and you'll see what's called a boot scrape. This is where the men would scrape their boots off before they entered the home. All these streets was still dirt back then. The Davenport house, where it all started. Coming up on the right, this is the Kehoe Mansion. It's now a bed and breakfast, built in the early 1900s by William Kehoe for his wife and 8 children. Kehoe owned the iron foundry here in Savannah. And he used to brag that anything you could make out of wood, he could make it better out of iron. So to prove his point, everything you see painted in one Kehoe Mansion, now a bed and breakfast. By the way, this home was once owned by Joe Namath of the New York Jets. He never lived in the home, but when those 7 ladies found out about it, he left town. A true story. Coming up next is stop number 8, the Owens Thomas House, one of our house museums. And if you're going to tour one of the house museums, this is probably one of the ones you'd like to tour. Built in 1819, it was designed by William Jay, a 23-year-old architect from Bath, England, who designed several of the English Regency-style homes here. Open to the public, this being the most notable of all of his creations. This is stop number 8, and I think we got another guest coming on board, folks. Never know who you're going to meet on these tours. Welcome, sir. Folks, this is a classic example of English Regency-style architecture. one of several that was designed by William J. He spent about 3 years in the city and designed several other English Regency style on the tour. William J., the English Regency style. On the left, Oglethorpe Square, named for our colonial founder, James Edward